Hi, I'm Catherine Friend, and this is Hiring on All Cylinders. We're powered by the Hire community, and we explore bold ideas and fresh perspectives from key leaders within the talent industry to help you build exceptional teams and scale with purpose. So today I'm joined by Jerome Leclerq, Global Head of Talent at Wise. And Jerome's career spans really high growth companies from LinkedIn and Wise, where he scaled global talent teams and built data-led strategies with lasting business impact. So I'm really excited to have him with us today. So Jerome, thank you very much for joining me. Really appreciate it. For our audience, can you just give a quick overview of you and your role and what you do?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Jerome. So I lead talent at Wise. So what does that mean at Wise? It means I lead talent acquisition, talent development, which is effectively L&D, and talent management and performance. Wise, for those of you who don't know, is a technology business, and we build the best way to move and manage money around the world. So whether you're traveling abroad and you need a multi-currency account, or whether you're running a small business and you need to receive or send money, international payments across the globe, we try to make it as easy and cost-effective for you to do that.
So I know you've said before that some short-term fixes can often cause that long-term headache. So I'd love to hear about how you approach that and address that, particularly when you're scaling so quickly at Wise.
I remember a while back thinking about hearing this term of technical debt, often coming from engineering teams, and further down the track where you have to reinvent your tech stack or your infrastructure to kind of scale effectively, because much earlier on you've made short-term decisions that were maybe the right decision to make then to help the startup survive, but will cause significant pain down the road. So I try to take that concept into the kind of short-term to longer-term decision making. So I guess my view is always trying to minimize debts in the decisions that I make, so that we're thinking more strategically about what is the impact of the decision I'm making today on the future of the team, of the business, of the operation that we're trying to improve.
It's
you don't always get it right, by the way. It's maybe 50% of the time, but at least you're kind of removing 50% of the problems. But usually kind of a good way to do that, I find, is to, so I kind of walk around with this 2x2 diagram in my head of risk on one axis and impact on the other, and trying to figure out where does this decision sit? So, and risk really, it's one of two things. It's either I'm going to make a decision and I'm going to walk through what I would say a two-way door, which means that if I make this decision today and it's wrong, I can easily walk it back and pivot and take a different decision at a minimal impact, minimal cost, versus this idea of high risk, which could be walking through a one-way door, right? You walk through the door, you can't go back. Or if you have to go back, it's going to be seriously painful. It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of time and resources. So that's kind of the risk axis. And I think the impact axis is quite self-explanatory, but it's really the impact of the customer, not the impact of you. So how is your customer going to benefit from this decision, and what does that look like? And then that really helps to figure out, I can make it in the moment decision because it's medium to high impact but very low risk, and I can always walk it back if it's an issue, versus the ones where that high impact, high risk, where you're really doubling down on the data. You do thorough analysis and research, you speak to the right people, you get the right people involved into the conversation to make sure that you're making the best possible decision with the information available to you.
Yeah, and I think I really love that point that you said about the customer. And obviously in recruitment, we know that we've almost got two sets of customers. We've got our hiring managers, but then we've also got our candidates. So how do you balance this process if those, I guess, what's best for those customers doesn't necessarily always align?
Yeah, it's so that happens a lot.
Of course.
and I think sometimes it's trying to get your stakeholders to view the talent, the candidate, as the customer in many ways. There's this phrase that I think people have used quite a lot, which is, candidates are customers, and it's true in most businesses. So what is the right thing to do for them? But at the same time, how do we make this as pain-free for the stakeholder or the internal hiring manager or hiring team to go through that process? You don't always get it right. People don't always agree. But typically, if you index on the candidate being the customer versus necessarily the stakeholder being the only customer, you get better return on the talents and capabilities that you bring into the organization. And often what happens is you end up improving the process or that relationship with the stakeholder by focusing on the candidate.
Absolutely. And I guess like so looking at that in terms of like hiring initiatives or process improvements, how do you decide with your customers in mind which ones are worth moving forward, and perhaps which ones you may delay or maybe drop when things become really urgent and you've got the pressure from the business, they want to move really quickly?
Yeah. So when I was at LinkedIn, I was really lucky because I got to learn firsthand from some really strategic minds in the organization. We had a lot of like ex-consulting, McKinsey type of individuals of the business, and they come with a wealth of knowledge of like, mechanisms, structures and diagrams to use. And but again, another 2x2, which is always around the kind of that ROI impact overlaid against difficulty, complexity, or how resource intensive it is to do something. And it kind of helps you prioritize. Because in reality, in fast moving businesses, there's always 101 things you could do.
Absolutely.
But your team can only absorb 3, right? So what are going to the 3 things that your business can focus on? So what is kind of a high impact, low complexity, which is a given. You should do this. But in reality, maybe that's not something that I need to spend my time on. There's something that my team can spend their time on. Versus what is high impact and highly resource intensive, and it's going to take more than a quarter to deliver. It's probably a multi-quarter, potentially even a year to bring to fruition, and it's going to soak up a lot of resources. Like how many of those really big, hairy goals can you take on at any given time? So it's balancing the metrics where you don't want any kind of like low impact, high complexity tasks. You just kind of get rid of those, and you figure out who's best placed to deliver the others. And then you have to stagger them.
Yeah.
So you can only have one big hairy goal, and you can have multiple kind of low complexity, high impact projects, and that's where you should really spend your time. So another 2x2.
Another 2x2. I like this thought, this approach. But with so I guess with that, aligning on those like big hairy goals, I haven't heard that phrase for ages, and I forgot how much I enjoyed it.
Consulting term.
Yeah, I love it. But like when you're aligning on that, like how do you bring the business on the journey with you? So particularly if the priorities are competing.
Talentful provides flexible recruiting solutions to the world's most ambitious companies. Are you thinking about ways to add flexibility to your talent function? With recent market volatility and hiring set to return to growth mode in the near future, there's never been a better time to choose the right partner to help you scale. Talentful's embedded sourcing, recruiting, coordination, and talent advisory services have been trusted by the world's leading brands. Companies such as Atlassian, Microsoft, Expedia, Pinterest, Waymo, and more. Whether you're hiring across engineering, go-to-market, or G&A, Talentful has got you covered. To find out how Talentful can help you, visit talentful.com.
So nothing of what you do should be a surprise to the business. In fact, the business should be helping you prioritize. They have a deep sense of what's a priority for the customer. They have a deep sense of what growth is going to come from. In many times in TA, the requirement comes from the business, so they understand why they have a requirement. So they should really help you prioritize. And this is where like a vulnerability in leadership, authenticity in leadership is like, hey, we have all this stuff to do, like the engine is broken, or we need to like change it because we're growing so quickly. And there's a lot of things we could do, but bringing them into the conversation. And I think at Wise, we're very lucky because particularly our tech business, are very open and willing to come and ideate with us, to co-create, to make sure that we're focusing on the right thing for them at any given time. But then when you do that really well with them, they become your best sponsors and your best advocates. So when you need to have a conversation about why you're doing A, you're not doing B, you've got an army of people across the organization who are like, hey, I was involved in this discussion, and here are the reasons why we're doing this. And I think it's bread and butter change management. If you make those decisions in isolation, or HR goes off and goes, hey, like we think we need to do this, and then you do HR on people, and they don't understand what you're coming to them with new tools and system and new processes, then you can get significant change resistance. Whereas if you bring them in the first place and figure out what the right outcome and the right priorities are, it's a much easier change curve.
Absolutely. And I'd love to come back to that point. And I think with looking at some of the points that you made before about like the customer-centric mindset, we've talked before about breaking down complex problems into smaller, more solvable pieces. And I know data and decision making is a really key part of that for you.
Yeah.
How do you bring those principles together when you're looking at the blueprint for leading your team on a global scale?
The product mindset is about the customer. And it's not like something that everybody says, but like even in the world of talent, just challenging myself about why do we do certain things and what's in it for the organization. Like, for example, measuring performance across an organization. So in most businesses that I've been into, you get told annually or biannually, hey, like performance season's coming up.
Yeah.
And then what everybody does is they got to lock themselves in a dark room and they try and think about, what did I do 3 quarters ago, 2 quarters ago? And they try and write something down that sounds good because obviously they want a high performance rating. And hours go by of them doing that and not focusing on their day job. And they come out and they press enter on a Sunday and it's calibrated and it takes a couple of months and et cetera, et cetera. And like, is that really the most customer-centric thing to do? Or should we then go to the organization and say, hey, like, how do you measure high performance in your team? How do you measure high performance at the team level and at the individual level? How do you know that you have a high performance team? And really kind of distill from them what they care about and how they do things into a process that makes sense. And if you do that really well, you're going to have a high proportion of completion of performance management, for example, than you would do if you went to the business and say, hey, this is how we do performance management. Just if you could just follow the process, that'd be great.
Yeah. Which
doesn't really work. So I think product mindset is about that customer centricity. The data piece is, yeah, you're right. It's an analogy of like, how do you eat an elephant? One small bite at a time. So how do you deliver a really meaty, hiring, ambitious project? It's breaking it down into different parts, making sure you have the right people focusing on the problem. So if we're going to hire 1,000 engineers, I say, okay, so where are we going to put those engineers? Like 200 in the Americas, 200 in APAC, 200 in our talent office, 200, okay, great. Do we have the right people in the right location to be able to deliver that number? What does the underlying process look like? And then executing through the lens of data, right? So like every stage of the process, where do we see things working really well? Where do we see things not working? So double clicking on that. We have only one out of 5 candidates make it through this part of the process. Let's go deep into that. What works well? What's not working well? What's the issue? We've had situations before where, you give people take-home tasks and you see a massive drop-off. It's like, okay, well, is that the best way to be assessing someone? Should we think about doing it a different way? Or should it be their first interview process? Should it be further down where they're more bought into the process? So that data piece enables you to break down the task specifically and kind of course correct. And I think the last piece is, how do you influence your business to come with you on that journey? And that usually, if you co-create at the beginning, it's reasonably easier because they're the ones who benefit, right? And the biggest thing I always say to stakeholders, or even in kickoff meetings, is really get down to the pain. It's like, hey, Catherine, you want to hire another resource in your team. What's the impact of you not having that resource? And I will purposely kind of poke a bit more. You'd say to me like, oh, I'm working 14-hour days, or I'm having to travel a lot. I don't see my kids as often. Like, I would keep poking on what else? What happens if we can never find that person? And it's really going down to, you're going to overwhelmingly benefit from having that person in place. And as you get your stakeholders engaged into that conversation, and they become more quickly aware that actually we're hiring for them, they're the one who's going to benefit, they need to be part of that journey, it becomes easier to influence. Then the diversion, I think, becomes when people want to approach it in different ways. And then you can have the luxury of, again, from the product perspective, is piloting different solutions. So it's like, okay, well, this business wants to do it this way, that business wants to do it a different way. And we're actually going to isolate the problem in different regions for the same role and figure out, okay, well, over the next 3 months, we're going to do it differently. And we're going to see which one gives us the best KPIs and data that we can collect to see which one performs better.
Absolutely. And I guess on these data points, like with, we talk about the product piece there, is there any sort of North Star metric that you align to, like that you feel that you can best like balance like the speed, the quality, the long-term impact?
So I think when we do, well, it's not a consulting term, but like when you one of the things that I do, I'm about to kick it off actually with my talent leads because I've just formed my talent team, but it's a Salesforce model called vision to metrics, which is basically a one pager of like, what's your team vision? What are the supporting pillars or principles that you're going to deliver this vision through? And what are the metrics that you're going to track and measure in order to deliver those pillars, in order to deliver your vision? And I think in recruiting, like in many parts of the business, that the three kind of buckets of metrics is always cost, speed, quality. But for me, if you're a truly product-centric organization, I think the KPI that brings all of those together, it's probably your customer NPS. It's, what does your candidate say about the journey and the experience that they've had? And then what are your stakeholders saying about the customer, about the experience that they've had? And be able to measure those and then incrementally improve them. So one of the visions that we have in our team is like we want our NPS to be as high as our product NPS. Because if our candidates are customers and they're using Wise and they have this amazing UX and UI and we have a 69 NPS, then the experience they go through Wise and their hiring should be equal to or greater than our product NPS. Now, we're not there yet, just to be clear. But that for us is a really good way to think about where do we drive the improvement, how do we drive it?
Yeah, makes sense. And just on the cost piece that you mentioned, I know that we've had conversations before where you've mentioned about like pushing back on this like race to zero mindset, particularly with time to hire, cost per hire, which is obviously two of the main metrics that you mentioned too. Like how do you think about using that data so it can actually drive both that speed and the quality, and like bringing, again, to your earlier point, bringing the business on the journey with you to see that that's not necessarily the key metric that you need to be focusing on?
So I think one of the things I've got to be really careful, and I think every leader should do when you come into, as you gain more years of experience, you tend to narrow your mindset around like subconsciously, I know what works, I know what doesn't work. And sometimes you can walk into a new opportunity and say, hey, like, I did this previously and this was a problem and therefore we stopped doing it and I suggest we don't do it. And that's usually the wrong way to approach it, right? It's like you've got to come into a new business and just nearly forget all the experience that you have, get to learn your business, understand what works, what doesn't work, and then overlay your experience over time. So yes, in some organizations, the race to zero has resulted in cutting corners, right? It's like, hey, we want to move a lot faster, so we're not going to do the screen, or we're not going to do the assessment, or we just need those people in and we need to save 20 days. And the best way to do that is that way. I don't think that's true necessarily everywhere, although I think the efficiency of the process is key and moving faster.
Absolutely.
But what I would say is, as a theory, like I don't think I think having a constant focus and reducing time to hire and trying to get lower and lower and lower is not, for me, the right metric to look at. I think so your time to hire should not be ridiculously high. At the same time, you shouldn't have to drive it ridiculously low. The point is, what is the right process and the right stages of qualification to make sure that you're yielding a quality hire, but also paying attention on the lagging time between processes. So you could have a 3-stage process and still a really high time to hire because it takes you a week or 2 weeks to move one candidate from one assessment to the next, right?
Yeah, of course.
So it's pretty clear where you want to save the time. So it's the efficiency that matters more than the actual number. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense because, of course, like with all of these things, the business context is really important. Yeah. So, like as I said, like it might make sense to drive that down further in one organization versus another. And I also suppose it also applies to the skill set that you're hiring. Like, is it a leadership role? Is it like a mid-level role? So I suppose there's all these different facets, and I appreciate that there's not necessarily a silver bullet or a one-size-fits-all approach, which is obviously why talent's so interesting, isn't it? Can you share a time, like from you personally in the businesses that you've worked in, where you've looked at performance or productivity data, which kind of made you stop and pause and maybe pivot or change direction?
I love my job because I've got a vantage position. So I'm leading a talent team, it's only been a thing since last October. And I've learned a lot through this. it's made me realize that as you connect different data points across all three talent functions, so whether it's recruiting or L&D or performance and management, you realize that actually often your talent management performance data drives the strategy or the actions that you should be taking across recruiting or L&D. I look twice a year, we do performance management. I'm usually one of the first one to look at the performance data, because that tells me if there's a proportion of the organization that is significantly underperforming, my TA team needs to know that at any given time they may need to replace this amount of people, and or there's probably a learning intervention that needs to happen somewhere, right? There's an upskilling piece, or we need more leadership training, or something needs to change in order to drive that performance. And it's made me realize that as a TA leader, it made me realize why sometimes we're so reactive. Because those performance data conversation, if you see yourself as just a TA leader and you only care about TA data, you're not privy to those conversations, and they happen somewhere. And by the time somebody's kind of met about it and had a conversation and distilled what that means in practice, they turn around to you as a TA leader and go, hey, like, you need to hire another 400 people in that team. And you do it now because half of them are leaving. You're like, whoa, what's happened? What's going on? But if you connect the dots to that data much earlier on, and you've got access to that data, you can preempt a lot of those challenges ahead of time.
I think it's a really, really good point. I think, like, particularly what we're seeing more and more is that TA leaders are sort of being like pulled into those bigger conversations, either through their roles getting bigger, and it kind of goes back to that do more with less approach, and actually talent leaders need to take on more, which I know is a different problem in itself, or just the way that, you know, the lines are becoming more blurred between like talent and people functions. And I think, like, as you like mentioned, like, you're in a great position, you've got that vantage point. For businesses that aren't in that vantage point, is there any like I suppose, because you've obviously moved into that more recently, like, what's kind of the learnings that you've taken from growing that remit, and what would you advise other talent leaders to consider if they're potentially sitting on the precipice of doing the same?
Through my journey in TA, to position myself as a business leader first, a people team or an HR leader second, and then a TA leader third. Because TA is part of the people team, and the people team is part of a business. So you got to get curious. You can't just focus on like what my team is doing and not pay attention to what the people partners are doing, or what the ER team is doing, or what the reward team is doing. Like, you got to be super curious about what they're doing, what problems are they solving. And then the second layer to that is like, how is that helping the business? What dynamics are happening in certain parts of the organization, in certain functions? So it's that curiosity. And that's really how you succeed in a much smaller organization. If you don't have a L&D function, a TA function, a performance management function, it's just really deeply understanding what are the people dynamics within an organization that are, how things are shaping. Where do you foresee problems? And being that business people leader first before you're a TA leader, and helping stakeholders, even coaching or advising on how they can avoid certain problems further down the tracks. So being deeply involved into the business and what the business is doing, and spending the time. I think sometimes I see leaders spend a vast majority of their time with their teams and not enough time with the business. And that can create a bit of a blind spot to what's really happening. At Wise, we don't have the luxury of not spending time with the business, because things change so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing that you think is true on the 1st of July may not be true on the 1st of September. So you constantly have to be in touch with your stakeholders and understand what's moving, what's changing, how things are changing, what problems you can see, how you can help them coach through that. So if you don't have the talent data, understanding the dynamics of each of your functions within your organization, particularly when you're smaller, it's much easier to do, is really, really important.
And then looking at, because obviously with the team that you have, like, it's obviously a large team, you're dealing with TA globally. How do you empower your team to also do this as well, and like making sure that they feel confident in like using data to make these decisions, rather than it being something that's simply used as a reporting tool?
So we talk about leading with data and not anecdotes, which we stay true 51% of the time. Sometimes you have like, I know this is true, but like trigger the data. It's like, I don't have the data, but I know this is true. What we do is we try to make it as easy as possible for leads in the people team to have access to the right data. So we have an amazing data visualization tool that pulls data from different HR tools into one. and everybody has access to those dashboards. So you're able at the fingertips to see what's happening in different parts of the business over different metrics. And we always constantly coach stakeholders, leads around, if we're going to have a conversation about something, lead with the data of that conversation. Otherwise, let's not have the conversation until you have the data. Because it's easy to have a bias about a perceived challenge based on previous experiences, which may not be true in your current business or your current function. And if you actually looked at the data, it may actually tell you something different. And our stakeholders, because we're a very product-led organization, are all about data anyway. So rarely are we going to have meetings that last more than 5 minutes if you don't have the data to back up your point. So you therefore have to make sure that you have the data to have that conversation.
Absolutely.
But it's easier said than done, right? It's because there's things like data hygiene and as recruiters, we're not always the best with data hygiene. So it's definitely something that we have to keep on top of. But we try to, in our team, is we have quarterly OKRs, and we try to embed into our OKRs some quarterly data objectives to make sure that we're staying on top of the right data and that we're kind of moving things along in the right way, so that if our data is as accurate as it can be, then we have better insights into what's happening into the dashboards and the visualization tools that we use with our stakeholders.
Amazing. Okay, makes sense. And then, like, going back to your point that you made before, like, obviously, things can change like dramatically from 1st July to 1st September. And I know that obviously you're growing at quite a speed. I know you've always been a big advocate for like building like flexibility into your team to allow, I guess, like, to allow you to move with pace and avoid that cycle that we've seen a lot of businesses go through in more recent years. What does flexibility within your team look like in practice for you?
I'm trying to build as a flexible team as I can. So to the reason to the why is that businesses they're like live ecosystems, right? They grow and evolve and change shape over time. You bring in capabilities and skills, you build into locations that may make sense today, but may not make sense in the future. So all of that organically changes all the time. And as you move fast as an organization, like we are trying to solve problems that have never been solved before, you kind of like, you don't really know what the 12, 18, 24 month looks like. So sometimes you have to shift and adapt pretty quickly. So having this flexibility in workforce composition is really, really important. Particularly in recruiting, where we all know about the kind of the peaks and troughs of recruitment. Be able to scale up and down as to meet business demands is critical. You can really only do that really well through flexible resourcing or being a flexible organization. So we have a proportion of our team who's FTE, like a minimal viable team of like perm recruiters. And then we kind of scale up through kind of RPO partners and vendors like Talentful, for example, like grow more capabilities in different markets. And then we, if needed in certain locations, we have contractors and freelancers. And we try and keep that flexibility. And everybody in the people team, all my peers, would like the same thing for their function.
That's really
so
interesting.
they love the fact that, recruitment has this ability to flex up and down. There's always a leading time. It doesn't matter which resources you use. But I think it's important to be able to be agile and to be able to shape your org in response to the business. I think the underlying reason as a leader to do this is, one, is more customer centric because you can respond faster. But two, if you've ever gone through layoffs in your team, I don't know, anybody will tell you they don't want to go through this again, right? It's incredibly painful. It's and it's just not, when you're in recruitment and you're like me, where your whole philosophy is to create opportunities for people, to be taking jobs away from people in your team, just it completely counterintuitive to your own values and the things that you want to do. And nobody wants to have to go through that. And I think having a workforce composition really helps you to avoid those challenges further down the road.
Yeah. And you can be more intentional with, like, when those growth patterns do come, or even on the other side, when things do wind down a little bit, and you know exactly how you're going to approach it. Yeah. Makes sense. So kind of looking at some of like the lessons from like high growth environments, which I know you're very well versed in. And I know we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I wanted to like dig into a little bit more, which is the recruitment works best when it's a shared responsibility. Yeah. And making sure that it's not just sitting in silo with the recruitment team, but like the business understands their accountability in it as well. So like from a practical standpoint, like what's the first step in like making that happen and getting the business to see that this is a joint responsibility?
I think it could just bring it to life for organizations. Whether you use famous companies and you walk through like how did Apple get to where they are and the diverse talent and how they operate to attract talent, it's really getting your stakeholders to realize the individual versus teamwork effort. If organizations make recruiting the problem of a team, a small team somewhere in the business, like, hey, like this is your problem to solve, we're going to focus on other stuff, you're going to move significantly slower than if the rest of the organization is also involved in the effort, right? Whether that's attracting, reaching out, assessing, whatever it is. And the companies that will win the best talents are the ones that do it at scale better. So if we can align on the concept that actually, yes, it is a team sport, your question is, how do you bring this to life in reality? It starts again with the kickoff meeting, like we talked about, is, okay, let's align on why we're hiring in the first place and the pain that the business is feeling by not having that person in a job and the pain that you are personally feeling by not having that person in your team. And then let's talk about how great it's going to be once you bring that person in. So you've got a vested interest in hiring that person. And then usually a question is, which is something I learned on LinkedIn, which is super powerful, which is recruiting this role a key objective for you this quarter?
That's an interesting question. Yeah.
Right. So it's like, okay, so you got to deliver this amount of sales, you got to build these products, and like, I need to hire this position. If it's part of your top 3, top 5 objectives, they're going to make you a priority. If it's not, you're going to be asking like, well, it's going to be on my OKRs. Should it be on your OKRs?
Yeah.
Like, how does this work out? Right. So it's starting with that. And then it's kind of building out the process for this role, how you're going to go to market. I can be the recruiter that's going to reach out to 500 people, but that's going to go significantly slower than if we do a sourcing sprint with the team, right? And you have a team of 30 people, and then they each reach out to 10 people. Or if I look at the top 10 targets in the market that we would love to bring into this role, that we would dream to hire for this position, is that person more likely to respond to a reach out from a recruiter? Or are they more likely to respond to the CTO reaching out or to the CPO reaching out to them? So it's finding those opportunities for collaboration, and how do you divide and conquer and therefore go faster? Does that help?
No, it does help. And I think with, I guess, again, with, if it's not on their roadcasts and it's not on their roadmap, sometimes we all know we get like hiring managers or stakeholders that maybe are a little bit more difficult to kind of like lean in, and, they want to see hundreds of candidates, or they want to see, they're not responsive. Like, how do you then manage and almost like push back, I guess, in that scenario? Like, if they're not leaning in and treating this like a team sport, how do you...
You go back to the data. So I'm fine to just be the person doing everything. That's okay. But there's only one of me, and there's only 24 hours in a day. So you can stand up to the whiteboard, your stakeholder, and just literally do the maths, right? I'm going to reach out to 500 people. Let's assume 40% of them respond. I do 30 to 45 minute screen of each of them. I have X amount of slots available in my day because I'm also managing other roles. I expect that I would have screened all of these people and given you a slate of 5 great candidates in about 4 weeks' time. How do you feel about that, Catherine? And you were like, 4 weeks? What? I'm like, okay, well, like, so how do we? Then the question is like, well, how do we go faster? Well, there's still only one of me, and there's still only 24 hours in a day. So what is a multiplier that will help us move faster? And that's where you create a choice, right? It's like, I'm happy to do it myself. This is how fast it's going to go. Or we can get other people involved, and this is how much faster it's going to go. Which you would rather do.
Absolutely.
And you can do that with every part of the process. Like, the powerful thing that we used to do at LinkedIn is stand on the whiteboard and draw out the timeline of recruiting. Because the first thing you speak to a hiring manager about is like, okay, when do you want that person to start? And what's the answer that you get 75% of the time?
Tomorrow.
ASAP. Tomorrow, right? So sometimes we used to say that as like, once you've heard that one too many times in a week, you're like, okay, fine. Let's say it was tomorrow.
Okay.
Let's work backwards. We should have had this conversation 3.5 months ago, but we haven't. So we're having a conversation today. So let's like go forward. And the thing that most stakeholders always say when you draw it out is like, hey, I'm going to source for 2 weeks and then I'm going to assess and with first stage interviews. And then the summer holiday, so you're not going to be there. Who's going to stand in your shoes? Or are we just stopping everything for 2 weeks, pick it up when you come back? And then it's going to be Christmas, whatever it is, right? And you look at the time, you're like, it's going to take me 6 months to hire this role. But you're usually going to get like, okay, so how do we do that faster? It's like, great question. So they go through every stage. How do we half the assessment stage? How do we half the sourcing stage? How do we half the screening stage? And the answer is always, how do we play as a team?
I love that. It's really great. I love the thought of like planning it out visually as well and being able to.
And it's really, really impactful. Like you've got it. They're not just hearing you saying it. They're seeing it play out on the whiteboard.
Absolutely.
In front of them.
And I guess like finally, and just building on that point there, with one of the big things I think always comes to is expectation. So know that a key phrase that you come out with is the purple squirrel.
Yeah.
So for anyone who hasn't heard that before, like what's that mean in a hiring context, and how do you use that idea to set realistic expectations alongside this timeline with those key stakeholders?
So just in case Brendan listens to this or other people from LinkedIn, this is not my phrase. But Brendan Brown, who led TA at LinkedIn for a long time, that's his phrase. Actually, I think he did a LinkedIn Talent Connect speech on that. So the purple squirrel is this concept of, I don't know how many purple squirrels you know. I don't know any. I've never seen one.
No, I've never seen any.
So it's this kind of laundry list of, and we all do it, by the way. When I recruit, I do exactly the same thing, even though I'm acutely aware.
Yeah.
I want somebody who has right brain skills, left brain skills, they're technical, they can pitch, they can sell, they can do everything to everyone. List, because, he's going to solve all my problems. That person can do all of this. To the reality of like, well, how many of them exist? And that's your starting point, right? So your question is like, how do you have that conversation with stakeholders? Again, in a kickoff meeting, like I would open my laptop and I'll go, great. So Catherine, tell me everything that you want that person to have. All these amazing skills. Okay, that skill, that's a new AI skill that came out 2 weeks ago that nobody has. You want that person to be an expert in that? Great, let's figure it out. Okay, let's build the search together. Press enter. Okay, so globally, there's 2 people who can do this role. So I estimate to hire one of those 2 people could take anything from 12 to 24 months, if not longer.
Like heart stuffing.
And then you're like, do you remember the pain that we talked about how like you're not seeing your kids and you're working 14-hour days? Like if that's a suitable time frame for you, let's go with that strategy. Or let's work together on, okay, so which of those skills do you think that, okay, that person doesn't have to be an expert in this new skill that nobody has? Let's remove that from the search. Let's remove this. Let's add something else. And by the way, let's remove the skills that you want that person to have that we have a lot of internally already. Right? Because we can probably coach, grow, develop that person to have that skill set over a short period of time. So what is your minimal viable profile? And press enter again. There's 1,000 now. Okay. Now that's more feasible. And let's figure out how we tackle that talent pool and how we do the reach out for these individuals. So like, again, it's going back to be that kind of visualized data-driven approach. I always have the thing, I always ask this question, which is, you want this skill set, this purple squirrel. I was like, great. Can you just show me one profile of someone that you know who does this? And they're like, oh, that why? So sometimes they'll show you someone and you're like, great. So we can use that profile to kind of distill. Oh, that's interesting. That person's got that experience with those skills, but that didn't come up in our conversation. So like, do we add, do we remove, do we replace? Like, let's figure out how we kind of reverse engineering that person's profiles, capabilities, skills. If you don't know anybody in the market and you're highly networked in the industry and you know everybody, the likelihood of that profile existing is increasingly unlikely, right? And so that's the purple squirrel.
Absolutely.
So turning a purple squirrel into a red squirrel and eventually into a brown squirrel or grey squirrel, whatever.
I love that. That's a great point to end on. Thank you so much.
No worries.
For any listeners who want to keep learning from you, where's the best place to connect?
Just connect directly. I'm always happy to have conversations with anyone who reaches out, who wants to have a conversation. Love to network, so reach out to me.
Thank you so much for tuning in into another episode of Hiring on All Cylinders. If you're not already a member of the Hire community, you can join by heading over to www.hirehq.com, or you connect with me directly, and we'll see you for our next episode. Until next time, thank you.